Good morning for everyone. It's a little damp in some parts of the state here, and it will be today, but really a very straightforward forecast. Given our recent shift and change to cooler conditions, but we will see a gradual warming trend and actually a dry pattern here setting up. So several days in a row with seasonably warm temperatures here and fair and dry conditions. We're looking at least ahead. In the last week, though, I mentioned cooler than normal. Our temperatures, I had to go back quite a ways to find a week this growing season where we saw something similar. But on the left-hand side here, these are departures from normal for the last week, and most of the state somewhere between 2 and 4 degrees Fahrenheit below normal, thanks to some of the very cool mornings we've had. We had some 30s reported in the Upper Peninsula on occasion, many temperatures in the 40s. We'll have a couple more days of that, but again, a gradual warming trend is anticipated here. But it was a break in what has been a very persistent upper air pattern and weather pattern across the upper Midwest this year. So we finally did get an extended break. On the right-hand side here, precipitation totals for the last week range from less than a quarter of an inch across much of southern lower Michigan to generally half to 1 inch or 1.5 inches across, well, the thumb and then the northern lower and then much of upper Michigan, upper peninsula of Michigan. You can see did get with the green and dark greens here a little bit heavier rainfall. But for most of the state, it was, especially for the south, it was drier than normal this last week. And given that there are areas, of course, that have trended unfavorably dry or have been that way for a while, and I just wanted to mention that or give an update on that. The right-hand side here, these are recent soil moisture values for the top 3 feet, expressed in terms of a percent of normal, and the reds and browns here are all below normal for this time of the year. So it hasn't changed that much really since last week. We do have on the left-hand side here, and this is going to be updated literally within the next hour or so here as we speak, but the U.S. Drought Monitor has portions, especially in central and southwestern lower Michigan, that are in the D1 moderate and even a couple spots in the D2 still in severe drought. So that's been, again, in some places it's been a problem, but as we've said all along, one thing that's really a sort of a hallmark of the season is incredible variability from place to place, and there are areas in the state that are actually wetter than normal, and again, contrasting these areas that are dry. So given the week that we had and generally below normal precipitation, we're close to where we were last week in terms of soil moisture in most locations. Our degree day totals for the season on the left-hand side here are the totals, and you can see those range from about 1,400 in the far north to about 2,200 in the far south. And on the right-hand side here, relative to normal, we do have some mixed bag, but generally we're ahead of normal. We have surpluses of degree days. These are, and actually it says 19th. This is actually through the 26th of August. Sorry about that, the label there. But especially across southwestern lower Michigan, we have significant surpluses. And if you think of those surpluses of degree days in terms of calendar time, we're at least a week, in some cases, probably pushing a week and a half, maybe even 2 calendar weeks ahead of normal. So our annual crops, especially those that are heavily dependent upon temperature, and of course, corn would be at the top of that list, they are in most cases significantly ahead of where they typically are, and likely will, given the forecast. I'll talk about that in just a second here. Will likely be ending the season with a surplus of degree days, even with the cooler weather as of late. On our map here this morning, I mentioned some precipitation. You can see a band of showers, a couple rumbles of thunder across central lower Michigan, and some down in the far southwestern corner of the state. That is all associated with the frontal boundary, which I'll show you here next. But that's going to be with us here for the next several hours into the afternoon before it finally comes to an end. That has given, and on the right-hand side here, these are precip totals of the last 24 hours that weren't taken into account on the total I just showed earlier. In general, most cases, most areas, we saw a tenth of an inch, a couple tenths, not very, very heavy. There's a one couple areas in north central you can see that did pick up a half an inch, but that again was the exception. That's what we're looking at here mostly today. Will be probably a quarter of an inch or so in most locations. And as we look ahead, I would it's probably fairly good odds. This might be the only precip we see in the upcoming week. It probably will be the middle of next week before we see anything significant again in terms of precipitation. So on the weather map here this morning, we do have a cool front pushing north to south across the state. That's what's setting off that rainfall. To the north of that, up in Ontario, you can see the big blue H there, Canadian origin air mass. And those that have been with us here, a couple of those over the last 1 to 2 weeks, which is the reason why we've had the cooler than normal weather. But that front's going to be pushing on its way out of the state here by later tonight, with high pressure settling in over the state for the next several days and probably even beyond that. Here's the map for tonight at 8 p.m. And you can see the front does make it past the southern border of Michigan and taking the rest of the precipitation with it. High pressure settles in there behind it. We will see some fairly cool temperatures tonight with this air mass tomorrow morning. 40s in most areas. There'll probably be some 30s in the far northern part of the state. It's not a some type of an early frost freeze event, but it's a sign of the change of seasons a little bit early. It's typically earlier than we see it, but it's a cool air mass, a cool dry air mass, and it will be a fairly cool start to the day tomorrow. We'll be looking at temperatures here today only once again in the 60s for highs, so several degrees below normal for one more day, and then again the cool night tonight, and then gradually we'll see warming with time here as we move into the weekend. Here's Friday morning's map, 8 o'clock. High pressure again over the region. Not a lot of change there. Friday will be a beautiful day. Well, actually, the weekend, the Labor Day weekend here is looking really outstanding in terms of outdoor weather. So we'll see our high temperatures generally warm from the 60s today into the 70s by the weekend, and then maybe some upper 70s and low 80s by early next week. Again, fair, dry conditions expected pretty much the whole time, with the exception of today. Now, I mentioned the precip here over the next 24 hours, probably really the only significant precip that we see during the week. These are totals through tomorrow morning, and again from the graphic here, you can see most areas just a couple tenths of an inch, mostly across the southeastern half of lower Michigan, and then less or little or none as you go north and behind the front. And then Saturday morning here, the weather map, high pressure right over the middle of lower Michigan. Another, again, just looking like an outstanding week here, or weekend here in terms of weather coming up for Labor Day. And the totals, this is almost a replay of the precipitation map that I just showed here a couple ago, but a drier than normal week for most of the state. There is some note up in the northern part of the state in the UP. There is some that's reflecting a possible weather system the middle of next week, but that's a ways off. And again, for many areas, I think we're going to go the vast majority of this week after today with little or no precipitation the whole time. So again, drier than normal, I think, is the important. Uh, in terms of water use, potential, especially the current cool conditions, and you can see our daily average is about 1100s to 1400s, especially towards here over the next couple of days. So water needs will be certainly below where they typically are for the end of August and early September, so lower than normal totals for the upcoming week. In the medium range, forecast guidance, as we look ahead here, you can see a troughing feature still persisting across the upper Midwest and the Great Lakes region. That's a key for us, and it's still there even in the 8 to 14 day time frame. But after that, again, the guidance is suggesting that this pattern, this cool pattern, does break down. But until then, a little bit of a duration or longer duration of the current cool spell. You can see in the upper right Our mean temperatures forecast to be cooler than normal and this is true both for the 6 to 10 and 8 to 14 day time frame. It also calls for, interestingly, for normal to above normal precipitation totals. And then we had been looking at a cooler and drier than normal type of direction here in the last week, but this one suggests a bit more active storm track across the region, several frontal passages going through, and more opportunities for precipitation than we've had. So cooler and wetter is what the medium range guidance suggests for really for much of the first 10 days of September. But let's move to finally here the new long lead outlook. And we've got the month of September up on the top from NOAA's Climate Prediction Center, and then the 3 month seasonal outlook, September through November, down below. A lot of this, some of this is based on the Pacific and the El Nino Southern Oscillation. And the expectations for a weak La Nina condition here for the next couple months, but then moving back to a neutral type state in the Pacific here as we move into the cool season. But I think the important message with these is all of these still point towards warmer than normal conditions. For again, and if we look at this in the context of that forecast guidance, probably looking for another change, maybe back to a pattern that we saw earlier, with warmer than normal weather returning by the middle of September, but then again averaging warmer than normal for well beyond that as well for the fall. And for precipitation, as you can see, the equal chances, no real forecast direction. For precip totals, you can see drier than normal in areas to our west and south, but for the Great Lakes, at this point in time, no direction. I think again the important message here, and this has been consistent for several weeks and even months of that warmer than normal direction, and so I think that's still a good bet. So summarizing here, we've got some rainfall to deal with, especially for the southern part of the state over the next several hours, but that is the exception. We'll see clearing, fair, dry conditions developing statewide by tomorrow, and then continuing through the Labor Day weekend. Just again, beautiful conditions. So it's a nice opportunity to get out, hopefully, and enjoy being outside. Uh, Really, really nice range of temperatures in the 70s during the day, and then the 50s at night. So pretty close to where we should be. And as you just saw here, looking ahead, still a little bit on the cool side for the next week to week and a half. But then again, the longer term outlooks suggest we go back to warmer than normal here for at least for the latter part of September and then maybe beyond.